Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well today. Well, let's get our brains around what GDP per capita is. Gross domestic product per capita, understanding what this means. I've done a separate video for this one particular friend of GDP so that you can have this clear in your mind. Here you go. GDP per capita is simply the total gross domestic product of a country divided by the size of the population. Per capita, per person, per head. Key idea, GDP does not allow, regular GDP does not allow us to compare countries based on their living standards, whereas GDP per capita does. Let me say that again. GDP, raw GDP, does not allow us to compare countries based on their living standards, whereas GDP per capita does. Equation for GDP per capita equals GDP divided by population. Okay, so what this allows you to do is to take the total value of all goods in a particular country and divides it by the population. So if there is a country like the United States, which has 300 million people, and as a result of 300 million people participating in an economy, you can imagine that the GDP would be quite high. Example number one. Example number two, Chile. There are only 17 million Chilenos, 17. So if all the Chilenos are out there working equally as hard as all of the people in the United States, there are only 17 million of them. And so the GDP of Chile is never going to be as big as the GDP of the United States because you got 300 million people involved in the economic activity in the United States, and you only have 17 million involved in economic activity in Chile. So how are you going to be able to measure that? Wait, I have an answer. You divide it by the population. So you take the total GDP of the United States, divide it by 300 million, you'll get a number. You take the total GDP of Chile, divide it by 17 million, you get a number. Those numbers, the answers to those two very, very simple mathematical calculations are numbers that you can compare because it shows you the value of the GDP based per person, whether they live in the United States or Chile. And that allows you to compare the GDP of, to find a commonality or compare the output in the economy between Chile and the United States. That's hilarious. I got all mixed up in my words. You get it, right? The answers of dividing US GDP by 300 million, you can compare with the answer for dividing Chilean GDP by 17 million. Coolio, that's GDP per capita. It allows us to compare countries' GDPs on an even scale by dividing it by population because every country has a common denominator and it's people. Rock on, my friends. I hope you found this video to be helpful. Talk to you in a bit.